Dawson, Season of the Wolf. Dedicated to friends Mike and Brenda Ward. Let's get straight into that. Even a man or woman who is pure at heart may become a wolf when a wolfbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright. I'd read that over the years in various books, penny dreadfuls and such. I've been in carnivals where normal men and women were displayed for pennies, and the barker claiming they were half human and half monster. I walked away laughing, and people thinking I was a loon. I'd laughed because I know monsters. I know there are real monsters who live in the forests and the mountains. Creatures that aren't supposed to be there, but are. And I know there are human monsters, men and women who prey upon the weakness of others, who rob and steal, too lazy to work for what they want. I made a trip to Dodge City, Kansas with Sherry. I told her it was just a shopping trip. Wanted to do my own Christmas shopping this year. Tim Grady had things running well, and I brought Lazy Eye Rowdy Nixon with me and Sherry. He had brought money and a list of what everyone at the crossing was wanting for Christmas, to give us gifts. I had such a list, but I was there for another reason. Sherry was in need of new clothes, and we needed medicines and such at the crossing. I wanted to arrange for the postal service to hold all mail. I'd send someone after it until snowfall. Then it just wouldn't be reasonable to send for it. While in Dodge City, I did my own personal shopping. What they didn't have in stock in the different stores, I ordered from back east, including a wedding ring. I knew Shay was buying medicines. What I didn't know was she had found a retired physician. She had promised him his own practice, complete with office, surgery, and private residence. He wouldn't make much money, but he'd have food, a warm, dry building he wouldn't have to rent, and time to read, fish, or whatever he wished to do. The doctor she recruited was Basil Watson, M.D. Dr. Watson, he was an older man. He had a spinster's housekeeper named Agnes. That was the only name she went by. She would have to accompany Watson. They had a history together, from what I could gather. Well, what was another room on a building I hadn't had built yet? I knew we were going to need a few drivers for the wagons, and I put word out. A large man with an easy smile approached as he came out of the gunsmith. Mr. Dawson? He asked, old floppy hat in hand. Yes. My name's Lon Talbot. I heard you were looking for men to drive your wagons back to the Indian Territory. You heard correctly. Well, I'd like to sign up. I'm a good worker, a hard worker. Well, you look a little down on your luck, Mr. Talbot. You drink? Probably more than I should. I'm sorry to have bothered you. He turned to walk away, disappointed and broken. Mr. Talbot, I said. My employers call me Morgan, or just Dawson. He looked me over. His smile had returned. You need a bath, a shave, haircut, and new clothes. Do you have a gun? No, sir. Well, you will have. Lon, we have whiskey, but you'll drink beer only. No more than 4 a day. Do you know where you are going? Indian Territory, I'm told. You have to fight monsters this winter. I'll pay you $20 a month. You still want to work for me? Yes, sir. Here, I gave him a cigar. Let's go buy you some clothes. Then get you cleaned up. Chapter 1. We spent 3 weeks in Dodge, and as much as I hated those haunted hills, I was happy to be headed back towards the hills of Oklahoma. We must have looked like a gypsy caravan travelling across the prairie. Lazy Eye drove the lead wagon. Dr. Watson drove his backboard behind the lead wagon. Sherry rode with him part-time. His housekeeper Agnes appeared to sleep on the back seat most of the time. Lon Talbot was good handling wagon teams, horses, whatever. Before we left Dodge City, he presented Sherry with a puppy. A male with brown hair, floppy ears and a sweet disposition. And Talbot told her he didn't have a name, and so she named the pup Tango. I told her she should have picked up a few more, but she smiled and said the Choctaw and the Cherokees camped behind the crossing had promised her 2 or 3 puppies. But Tango, well, he was hers. Rowdy, I shouted as we began moving into hill country. Pull up in the shade near the stream. We'll break there. Lazy Eye nodded and made for the shade. Sherry laid out fried chicken, bread and brewed some coffee. Lazy Eye and I fed and watered the stock. Talbot and the other men we hired walked around the rest stop helping with chores. Talbot had taken a fishing line and gone down the stream to fish. He returned minutes later and approached both Lazy Eye and myself. Dawson, I was about to cast my line out when I heard a growl. I looked up and, well, it was the creature standing across the stream. What's this creature look like, Talbot? Asked Lazy Eye. Big, 8 feet tall or so, covered with hair except for its face. His face looks similar to a monkey's, but those black eyes and those teeth, I figured you needed to know. Lazy Eye looked at me. Good way? Sounds like it. Let's get this meal eaten. Lon, when we start out, you drive Lazy Eye's wagon. Lazy Eye will ride with me. Everyone needs to have a gun close by. That monster, that's going to follow us. This is one of those creatures I talked to you about, Lon. They're man-killers. The local tribes call them face-eaters. Talbot nodded his head. I keep my rifle beside me. A slick Carl Green had stepped out onto the front porch and had tossed a basin of dirty water in front of the main building. The sun was bright and warm. A gentle breeze moved through the grass and kept people from being uncomfortable. Tim Grady crossed the street as he began calling the space between both sides of the crossing. Going to be getting hot today, Kyle, he said as he joined Slick on the porch. Reckon there's such a thing as a cold beer inside? Slick removed his top hat and wiped his forehead. I believe we can find something along those lines, Tim. And they started inside. Kyle had, with Dawson's blessing, summoned the Choctaw Digger well behind the main building. A well provided clear, cold spring water. A net had been made to hold a wooden keg of beer, which was lowered into the well. When it was tapped, there would be cold beer. And Tim said quietly, Travelers coming. Better prepare some cold tea also. Travelers, you say? Wish it was our folks. And Tim pushed his hat back. Yep, they've been gone most of the spring and now summer. And he smiled. I recognize one of them, Henry Anglin. Bet that herd not more than a day behind. You recognize any others? Know them? Nope. There might be a woman riding in that wagon towards the back. If it is, we'll have Brandon prepare her a room. Everyone else can sleep. Or the edge of town? Well, we'll see, Slick. Depends how many there are in the party. Go get that keg. First cold drink, or that's on Dawson. The stranger was dressed in a fashionable suit and hat. The left side of his hat was swept up like some cavalry officers on both the conflict between the North and the South. He led a pack horse and carried a riding crop in his free hand, and he smiled at Tim. Good afternoon, sir. I'm Valiant Price. Tim Grady. I see you're the constable here, and I must apologize. I don't think any of us know where we are. We just kind of followed Mr. Anglin here. This is Dawson's Crossing, Mr. Price. Charming little community you have here, Constable. Yes, Sheriff, said Tim. Forgive me, Sheriff. I wonder if there might be a saloon inside. There is. Excellent. And do you know if they have a bottle of good Kentucky bourbon or Irish whiskey? Asked Price. Henry Anglin had stopped by the side of the post and washed some of the trail dust off. He looked up at Price. Mr. Price, if they don't have, I'm sure they have some cool cold beer, or a soda pop which will quench your thirst. I'm sure they'll have something. Price climbed off his horse and tied both his horse and pack horse to the hitching rail. Well, he said as he wiped the dust off his clothing, let's see what we can find. Now the three men walked into the trading post. The windows were open and the front door remained open, so a pleasant breeze flowed through the building. Olivia, who had been sitting at the table, drawing on a piece of paper, stopped drawing, looked up and smiled. And Price gasped and pointed. What a precious little girl! Tell me, child, who do you belong to? I belong to my grandpa right beside you. This is your child, Sheriff? Yes. Her name is Olivia. Olivia, Price repeated. And how old are you, my precious? 7 or 8. But it ain't polite to ask a lady's age, mister. Indeed. I beg your forgiveness. I'm told Olivia got up from the table and walked over to Price, looked up at him and asked, Mister, are you some kind of sweet-talking, sneaky, low-down saddle tramp? A confidence man? A shearer? A lazy hobo? No, child, Price smiled. I am a school teacher, a librarian. Ah, dang it, said Olivia. You would have been better off being a no-account horse thief, or something else. Maybe I'll have that beer you were talking about, Sheriff, smiled Price. Henry Anglin stood with his back to the bar and introduced the other man and the women as they came through. He was Boris Pratt, a non-denominational minister. The woman was Lauren Farmer, singer, dancer, companion. She was, she said, mainly because Olivia was still among the men, currently without a job. Slick walked over to her and handed her a beer, and she looked at Tim and Pratt. I'm her grandfather. She knows what beer is and probably what you used to do for a living. Sheriff, are there any rooms available? Yes, ma'am, replied a woman's voice. We have a room for you all if the two gentlemen don't mind rooming together. Mr. Dawson would insist we put you up. When Sherry returns, you'll share the room with her. And she is the future Mrs. Dawson. Pratt clapped his hands together. A wedding! How wonderful! And he turned to look at the woman who'd spoken up. And you are? Dawson spoke up. That's Brenda. She runs the place. Morgan! Olivia squealed. She made her way past everyone and leapt into his outstretched arms. Hello, Pumpkin. Did you, missus? She hugged me and told me, you need a shave. And who is this gentleman? Asked Price. This Mr. Price, replied Henry Anglin, is Morgan Dawson, the owner of Dawson's Crossing. He looked at the door and continued. This is Lazy Eye Rowdy Nixon, Miss Sherry Griffey, and I'm afraid I don't know who you are, sir. Who? I'm Lon Talbot. I'm new. Henry lit a cigar, finished his beer, and asked for another. Talbot, you part of the Clay County Talbots out of Missouri? Yes, answered Talbot. I thought I recognized you. Morgan, your new man here, ran one of the first newspapers in Missouri, if not the world, after the war. What happened to you, man? It's personal. Henry nodded. Then I'll leave it at that. My name's Anglin. Dutch Anglin? Talbot asked cautiously. The gunfighter? Now it was Henry's time to smile. No, Dutch is my brother. I'm Henry Anglin. I grinned. Lon, we helped Dr. Watson and Agnes inside. Carl, you got good cool water in the well? You brought a doctor and a nurse? Relax, they're older folk. Now, pitcher of water, please. I could hear Lon out on the porch. You be right careful, Agnes. You too, Doc. Mr. Talbot, came a strong male's voice. Please address me either as Doctor, Dr. Watson, or Dr. Frankenstein. Just don't address me as Doc. Agnes's voice could be heard. Basil. It's a term of endearment. It's not unflattering. Lon, he means nothing about it. He's tired. It's been a long trip. Thank you for helping us down. I heard Dr. Watson. My apologies, Lon. Let's go in and get out of this heat. They came inside and Carl asked them what he could do for them. Dr. Watson asked for a beer with a glass of cool water. Agnes asked for a glass of cool water. I told Tim and Henry. There was a storm brewing and would hit about dark. I told Lazy Eye to go to the Choctaw camp and ask for help in unloading the supply wagons. Then he should ride out to where the herd was and have them bed the stock down. Take Swift and some young men ride Nighthawk, spelling the drovers. Henry wrote a letter to Dutch to stay with them, and he'd ride out before daylight and help drive them the rest of the way. Lazy Eye took off on his mission. I looked around and saw Sherry holding that pup Tango. She was visiting with the Price fella and Minister Pratt. Price looked familiar, but I couldn't place him right away. The wind coming through the doors was cool, but autumn was upon us. I had the door shut, more lamps lit, and sent Slick to make sure Amos knew we had company. Beef stew will go a long way in feeding everyone. And far off into the hills to the west of us, we could see flashes of lightning. Everyone had devoured their meal. I drank a couple of beers and chased it down with a glass of cool water. Sherry stood and helped clear the table. She was good about those kind of things. Brenda and the doctor's woman Agnes began washing dishes. Lauren and Olivia dried dishes, pots and pans. Poor Amos was run out of the kitchen to be with the men, and I produced a box of cigars, and Carl found a jug of moonshine. Where did this come from? I asked. I had it a long time before you ever came here. Think it's time to get rid of it. I couldn't agree more, Mr. Green, remarked Price. A loud clap of thunder and a flash of lightning told me it could be a wild night. My, this might well be the kind of night we could tell a few ghost stories when the ladies join us. Mr. Price, I'm just guessing, said Lon. You probably know a lot about ghosts, goblins, vampires and such. I know a few. The ladies walked into the front room. Those of us who were sitting up rose. I escorted Sherry to a chair I'd been sitting in, and she accepted it. All the ladies sat comfortably. Mr. Price believes that this would be a good time with the storm rolling in, that we should hear a few good ghost stories, I said evenly. Well, said Sherry, imagine, a ghost story. Oh, Miss Griffey, Price said with that know-it-all smile. It's just for fun. We are all grown here. There's really no such thing as ghosts, goblins, and other such monsters. Oh, you might be surprised at what's real, and what is fun, said Sherry. Why, whatever do you mean, Miss Griffey? Asked Minister Pratt, and she replied, Oh, did no one tell you? Warn you about these hills? Oh, they're haunted, really. And Henry spoke up. You all knew. This land is populated by monsters. Monsters that will rip your heads off your shoulders, eat your face, kill your stock. Did I miss anything, Morg? He asked. From a distance, you think you see a solitary elk. You get close and you find out it's a creature with a deer's head, and it's walking upright like a man, only it looks starved to death. Wolves who climb trees and hunt their victims, who can also walk upright like a man. Werewolves, said Price with a smug smile. There's an old poem. We've heard it before, Price, and they aren't werewolves. Agnes arose from her seat. She looked paler. Please, excuse me. All this talk about monsters, ghosts and such has always frightened me. Basil, I think I'll turn in tonight. Yes, Agnes. We've had a long day. Thank you, Mr. Price, for a stimulating conversation. And the cold red eyes of a beast watched the drover turn the responsibility he held for the cattle over to the Choctaw. The drover was relaxed, sleepy. The beast was crouched behind a large pine tree. The drover had to pass this way. Closer and closer he and his horse came. Saliva dripped from its open mouth. The horse did not smell or sense it. Closer and closer. A bright flash of lightning and a clap of thunder. The rider was abreast of his hiding place, and with a roar he charged the man on the horseback. There was terror and fear in the drover's eyes. He had no time to reach for his gun before the beast was upon him. He screamed as the jaws of the beast encircled his neck. His eyes glazed over as he heard the crunch of bones and felt the long dagger-like claws rip his entrails out. The horse had continued to scream in terror, and as the beast removed the drover from the saddle, it slashed deep wounds with its claws upon the poor horse, who raced away bleeding and riderless. The beast struck its kill to a tree and began eating its fill. Chapter 2. Towards noon the next morning, we all heard the cattle being driven towards the crossing. Lazy Eye was riding towards us, his head bent down. Even at a distance, I knew something was wrong. Tim stood at my elbow. Something's wrong, Morgan. I think so too. Lazy Eye isn't himself. He reined up in front of us. It was obvious he was disturbed about something. Dutch is putting the cattle in that meadow behind us. Lazy Eye paused and looked at me, then to Tim, and back to me. There was a death some time last night. Young guy riding on paint. Choctaw relieved him past 10, or maybe later. Something killed him. Tore him to pieces. Cut the horse up bad too. Dutch put it down before we started out. And Tim was rubbing his chin in thought. You said something killed the drover. Mountain lion maybe, or a big black bear. Whatever killed that boy almost tore his head off, then fed on him. We thought maybe wrapping his body and bringing it in. Put that doctor that came in yesterday to work. There was so little of the body left, we just buried him, read from the book, and made a wait here. I reached over and took the reins out of Lazy Eye's hand. I'll take care of your horse, Rowdy. Go in, drink a beer, get some rest. Thanks, Morg. He lifted his eyes and looked at us again, from one to the other. Whatever killed that boy, it ain't through. We weren't that far from here. I understand. I just wanted to know. There were no Gurgway, Wendigo, or Janoska. Lycan, upright wolf? No, too damn savage. Is there such a thing as a cat that walks on 2 legs? Because this thing, I walked away on 2 legs. Are you sure 2 legs? Did it leave any tracks? If it happened after the rain, it had to have left tracks. Lazy Eye wiped his forehead with his jacket sleeve. Damn, Morgan. I must be getting to see now. I should have noticed. Go on inside. I'm riding out to have a look. Not without us, you're not. The Dutch had switched from a fresh horse, and Henry was mounted on his own Palomino. They were leading Banjo, and Sherry came out. Concern etched across her face. She handed me my .44-40. You should take some men with you. We can handle it. Tim, I said. No one goes in the timberline alone or unarmed. Talk to the Choctaw and the Cherokee. More than likely they know already what happened. Make sure the men in those camps are armed and sober. The same here. We took off at a quick pace and rode towards the site of the killing. No one wanted to talk. I wanted to know what had killed and butchered the boy. If it was this close then, in theory, it could show up at the crossing. We rode a while when Dutch reined up. Coyotes were digging up the grave where the poor drover's remains laid. Dutch cut loose with his .45-70, driving them away. Damn scavengers, he said, and then spat on the ground. Well, let's see if we can find any tracks those coyotes didn't ruin, I said. And we dismounted and tied our horses. Didn't hold out any hope we'd find anything. We began our search there at the grave. Then I began circling the graveside, working my way around the area. Henry and Dutch began pouring over undisturbed ground. I'd just about given up hope when I came across one track in some trees. I called Dutch and Henry to join me. It was the track of an enormous canine, but it was distorted. The front part of the track was canine, but the track began to change towards the back of the track. The back portion of the track took on the form of a man, like Hill. Henry found the trackway, and we followed it until we saw where this creature had sat down under a tree. It had leaned against the tree, and had left several strands of rich grey and black hair. Well, he must have flown away, fellas, said Henry. It didn't leave any other tracks. I straightened up, looked over at both the Anglin brothers, and said, This beast left here wearing boots. Boots? Exclaimed Dutch. What kind of boots? Henry walked over and joined me with a knee on the damp ground, studying the track, and his gaze met mine. I nodded my head in response to his unasked question, and Dutch had joined us. The kind cavalry troopers wear Dutch. Well, how can you tell? Because, little brother, replied Henry. In his hurry to dress, after he morphed back into a human, he lost a button. We got the genuine werewolf or skinwalker here, I said, and I couldn't help but suppress a shudder. Hey, werewolf, how exciting! I'm afraid I don't know what a skinwalker is. Val Price sat at one of the tables dusting his books off. Are you sure you gentlemen aren't trying to frighten me after last evening? Oh, this is rich. We're serious, Price. Now, do you have any books that talk about werewolves? You are serious? I'm afraid I don't have anything which would help you. Okay. Don't be roaming around outside without a gun or some sort of company. Stay away from the forest. But I wanted to explore these forests. No. As long as you make your home here, you obey my rules. He made a scowling face. Surely you don't suspect? I don't suspect anyone. Yet. Besides, Price, said Henry, you don't wear boots worn by a cavalry troop. You suspect a trooper? Why, that's preposterous. Believe what you wish. Just stay out of those woods. Even in the light of day? Even in the light of day, Price. You see what I do know about werewolves, skinwalkers, and such, replied Henry. They don't need a full moon. Last night there was no moon at all. Now, Reverend Pratt was just as hard to convince as Price had been. If such things did exist, they were satanic, and only holy water or the cross would defeat the imp of Lucifer. Dr. Basil Watson said he'd heard of men and women who suffered from lycanthropy, believed they would transform into a ravaging wolf under the full moon. It was fascinating to observe these poor individuals undergoing their imagined transformations. "Have you actually observed this?" I inquired. "Yes," he told me, when he was a medical student in England many years ago. It was, he told me, quite exciting to a young medical student. Agnes sat quietly while I questioned Dr. Watson. As I was leaving the good doctor's room, she followed me out. "Basil is a brilliant man, Mr. Dawson. Everything he told you was the truth." "I never said it wasn't. I apologize if I've given you or the doctor cause to think." "Why are you questioning everyone? I was to understand you thought a cavalry trooper might be responsible. Who are you, Mr. Dawson? Why are you so interested?" "Miss Agnes, what is your name?" "Answer my question, sir, and I'll answer yours. Is that acceptable to you?" "Morgan is a retired Deputy United States Marshal." Sherry was standing in the hallway. "He knows quite a bit about monsters and possession. I was, and quite possibly am, possessed by an unclean spirit. He stood by me, the Anglin family, Lazy Eye, and countless others, Miss Agnes." "Agnes and daughter Montgomery." "The Ozark witch?" exclaimed Sherry. I was lost. I heard tales of this woman, but never believed what I'd heard. "A Deputy United States Marshal? Yes, I know who you are now. I know your story." "Okay, on even ground now. Except, how'd you hook up with Dr. Watson?" "He stopped some really horrible men from burning me at the stake, escaped with me through the Ozark Mountains into Arkansas. He started a medical practice, and I served as his housekeeper and nurse. We've been together for 30 years. He never thought it mattered if we were married. I consider Basil the closest thing I shall ever have to a husband. I assure you he feels the same about me." "None of our business." "Then we aren't suspects in this terrifying killing?" "No, ma'am. Thank you for your time." Night came and went. Everything was fine until the Choctaw sent for Tim. During the night, a Choctaw brave had begun making rounds of the community they had behind the trading post. He managed to get a rifle shot off before the beast had ripped his throat out. Then, as it had with the drover, he ripped his entrails out and began to feast upon them. This creature had dragged what was left of the poor brave and had impaled his remains on a tree limb, which it broke off. The killing, it was brutal. I hadn't stopped there. Chickens, dogs, hogs and 2 horses, they were all slaughtered. I knew in my mind they had heard all the death screams, but who could blame them for not stepping into the night? That would have meant certain death. Then the wind didn't stir. The leaves fell from the trees. The sawmill was up, and those working sawing and making lumber did so under armed guards. Lon Talbot had taken charge of the milling, and the tower I was having built was going up quickly. Every few feet I had shooting ports put into the walls. I made sure Amos had someone in the kitchen with him at all times. Dr. Watson was busy checking everyone, ensuring that they were healthy. He carried a Colt 45 in his waistband. Price had gone about trying to teach Olivia and Harry. He was a fine teacher, but he preferred to read the works of William Shakespeare and Edgar Allan Poe. He was a generous man, loaning his books out to the hands who were eager to read things other than Penny Dreadfuls or the Police Gazette. They consumed my magazines and newspapers. Reverend Pratt decided he simply acted as a spiritual advisor. He'd hired the former entertainer Lauren to be his housekeeper. At night, we locked everyone inside. "Morgan?" "Yes, Sherry?" "You think it's a werewolf, don't you?" The tracks, half wolf, half man. I'm not sure." "You could send for Scott and Lilith, or they could help you." "It would mean sending someone into the Lost Valley." "I could go." "No, you'll stay here with me." "Lazy Eye?" That's tempting, but I may need him here with us." "Dutch knows the way up there." "I may need Dutch too." "No, I think we need a volunteer." And I called a meeting with all the hands and newcomers. I wasn't sending any of them. I explained to everyone what I thought we were up against, how many had been killed and who I thought might help us. And Val Price spoke up. I really wasn't surprised. "These people you'll be sending for, What is their expertise, if I may ask? Mr. Price, believe me, you don't really want to know. Do they have something to do with werewolves? Are they specialists? Dutch Anglin cleared his throat. Price looked at him. He raised his right eyebrow. You have some word about this couple which might... They're werewolves themselves, Mr. Price. Of course they are. Olivia stomped her foot on the floor. Everyone turned to face her. They are werewolves, Mr. Sneaky Smile. Miss Olivia, said Agnes. Remember, everyone has an opinion. She glared at Price. Even sneaky, smiling boars. Price raised his eyebrows, tilted his head, and smiled. By all means, Mr. Dawson, send for your tame werewolves. I am anxious to meet them now. Charles Brewster, one of the new hands that had come up from Texas, was given a letter addressed to Scott and Lilith. He was to tell them it was important not to wait for an answer. He would leave the next morning. The next morning, we all awoke with a more of a chill in the air. Brewster picked a strong, fresh horse. Henry and I both saw him off. We can't do anything except get us a bite to eat. I'm sure Amos is brewing up coffee. We walked into the kitchen. Amos was sitting at the table, shotgun in front of him, facing towards the door. Morning, Amos, I said as chipper as possible. Then I noticed the shotgun. You expecting trouble this morning? Well, open the door and take a look, boss, and you tell me. Harry moved over to the door. He unlocked the door and swung it open. The mutilated body of a coyote had been tossed against the outside of the door. Deep scratches marked the door. I figure we're in for a long day, unless you or someone else catches and says this monster back to hell. Morg, take a look. I walked over to where he was standing and pointed to what appeared to be a man's handprint, in blood, on the outside of the door. Does this look human to you? Yeah, it does. About 8 or 9 years ago, back in, let's say 1879 or 1880, some real smart fella discovered no two people, not even identical twins, had identical fingerprints. Now then, this monster left his handprint and fingerprints for us. If this thing is one of us, we can take some ink, stationery, and have them put their fingers in the ink and give us a copy of their fingerprints. We compare them to what's on the door, and we should have our monster. How accurate is this? I understand it's good enough to convict in court. We're probably not going to convict in a court of law. Chapter 3. Let's get straight into that. Brewster's horse was a good sturdy mount. He was making good time. Actually, he was glad to be away from the crossing. Too many strange things going on. Too much talk about werewolves, whatever they were. He slowed his horse down to a walk. He was curious about this letter, and thought about reining up and reading it, but he knew if either the Anglins found out he'd read a private message, or they'd fire him. Being fired was the last thing on his mind, as he felt himself being jerked from his saddle, and he was thrown several feet into the air. He landed hard but managed to see the enormous creature coming towards him. He realized this was a creature right out of hell. He stood close to 8 feet tall, lean and muscular. He walked like a big muscular man, red eyes and a mouth full of sharp teeth designed for tearing. Its mouth was huge, and the claws on this beast were fully 6 inches long. Brewster managed to pull his pistol and empty it into the chest of the monster. It cocked its great head and roared. Laura and the preacher's new housekeeper and cook were standing at the bar talking to Slick. I saw nothing wrong with it and hoped the preacher wasn't going to preach to her about the sin of a strong drink. I had built a fire in the fireplace, and I was reading one of Price's books, Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. And there was a strong, hard knock at the door. I recognized Lon Talbot's voice calling my name. Why, I wondered, was he outside? Dutch came to his feet and grabbed his rifle, and we went to the door. The Reverend was already there, and I told him to open the door. Reverend Pratt opened the door. Lon rushed in and pointed out the door. Pratt stepped in front of the door, turned his head back inside the building, and threw up. I pushed him aside and saw what had made him vomit. At the edge of the porch was a long wooden stake, and impaled on the top of the stake, mouth wide open, forming a scream, was the head of our messenger. The ripped, shredded, and partially eaten body of Brewster lay on the porch, clutching a letter he'd carried. "Dear God, what could have done this to him?" "Lots of things, preacher," said Dutch. "Only, whatever did this, thinks like a man." "Yeah, writes like a man too, Dutch," I said. "What?" I held the blood-stained letter out to Dutch, and Henry had joined us, and read, written in Brewster's blood, "He didn't make it." I sent Sleek to get a few men to get the body into the barn. I took a burlap bag and removed the head. "You want me to get Dr. Watson?" "He'll keep until morning, Lon." I turned. His shirt was covered in blood. Blood on his hands. If anyone ever looked guilty, Lon Talbot did. "I guess this is pretty damning, isn't it, Morgan?" "Yeah. Dutch, let's take him over to Tim. He'll be safer locked up than free." "I promise you, I didn't kill him." "I believe you, but some of these others won't." That night, we woke Tim Grady up, and we locked Lon Talbot in a cell with iron bars. "You don't think that poor man actually did that barbaric thing, do you?" Lazy Eye asked. "He'd been in the kitchen when everything happened." "Nope, I just put him inside for his own protection." You think?" "What I think is maybe we need to ford up. Before we left him, I gave him a 10-gauge with slugs made from silver. The cell door isn't locked and he has the key. In the event something attacks the jail, Tim will take Olivia and all of his silver and move into that cell with Lon." "Morgan," Sherry said, "Brenda said Mike needed to see you upstairs." I excused myself and knocked on Mike and Brenda's door. Brenda answered the door, but it was dark in the room. Mike wasn't sitting directly behind the Gatling gun. "Don't light a match or pass in front of the window, Morgan." "What's going on, Mike?" "You got a guest down by Lon's blacksmith shop. He's just hanging out, watching us. Look, see? Looks like a cavalry officer's blue trousers. There he goes, round in the back of the blacksmith shop. He'll come out behind the new sawmill, and cross over and circle behind us, the barn and the school. There! Watch him." "Thanks, Mike." "Be careful, Morgan. There may be more than him out there." I walked down to the ground floor, and there he stood, a genuine cavalry trooper standing in front of my fireplace, drinking my beer. He looked at me and nodded. I saw Henry sitting at the table, but I knew he held a gun under the table. Dutch was leaned with his back against the bar, his gun hand near the butt of his gun. "Marshal," he addressed me. I retired. "I'm Captain Mark Terry, attached temporary to Judge Smith's court in Fort Smith." "What can I do for you, Captain?" "It's believed you have a Spanish agent in your midst or on your property who savagely murdered a trooper in Fort Smith and is here to assassinate you." I wanted to laugh, but the look on his face told me he wasn't fooling. "I'm not interested in the Gatling gun you have in an upstairs window or the ones your gunsmith is building. From what I heard from Mr. Henry Clay Wallace and their father Abraham Anglin, you need that firepower. This assassin appears to be a true lycanthrope, a werewolf, yes. I'm here to offer my services, and you can help me by relaxing. It will come to you." "Captain," Dutch asked, "can you tell us why the Spanish government is so keen on wanting Morgan Dawson dead?" "Captain Nathan Wathen, a name you and Mr. Dawson is familiar with, was hired to capture several man-eating specimens of the creatures you have fought. They will be shipped to Cuba, where they will be beaten into submission and taught to go behind enemy lines and kill as many of the opposing force as possible. We're not at war with Spain right now, are we? The War Department believes we'll be at war within the next 9 to 10 years. And can I have your help?" Yeah, I want that werewolf." "Hombre membre, Mr. Dawson," meaning werewolf in Spanish. Robert Castle had been attacked in the swamps of Louisiana 2 years before the war between the states. The creature which had attacked him was known among the Cajuns as a rougarou. He had not died, but he'd found out about approximately 3 days after he would never be severely hurt again. He had been infected by some exotic virus or parasite which allowed him to change from his human form to a more savage, lichened form. Now, he normally stayed deep in the swamps, but on certain nights he felt compelled to hunt inside the farming communities. And later, he hunted in New Orleans, where he encountered others of his kind. A year ago, he'd been contacted by a man who wished not to be identified, and was asked if he had the skills to kill for profit. He assured his contact he did. Could he control his primal side, think like a man, even talk if needed to? And he assured his new employer that he could. He was paid $10,000 in gold coin to kill Morgan Dawson, and now he was at the threshold. Dawson was holed up in the building. He recognized Captain Mark Terry. He'd been pursuing him for some time. His cover story was he was attached to Judge Parker's court out of Fort Smith, Arkansas. But Terry was pursuing him for professional and personal reasons. And when he took care of Dawson, he'd killed Terry also. And from the woods, the timberline, he was craving food. He watched a big man being released and going back to the trading post. Then he saw the little girl, the sheriff's grandchild. She was warned not to go into the timber. He had the cavalry uniform on, and it was time. He called out to the girl. "Miss, oh, young lady, I need your help." Olivia had to have been surprised. There was a one-man army inside, and his uniform looked much better than this one. "Please, miss, I'm Private Castle. My horse threw me. I'm looking for my commanding officer, Captain Terry." "Are you sure he's your cap? Or are you a stinking deserter?" "No, I promise I'm not a deserter." "Well, okay, I'll take you inside." She reached out and he took her hand, and she led him across the road. Olivia opened the door and Castle snatched her up. He'd grown his claws out. Tim and I had both started for her, but we saw he wasn't entirely human. "Stay back or I'll rip her throat out. Hello, Captain Terry. We finally meet face to face. I'm Robert Castle." Everyone was quiet still. Castle looked around and finally said, "You, the troll behind the bar, come out here and collect everyone's guns, or I will kill this girl." "He'll do it," said Terry. "You see, Captain Terry knows I'm a monster. I killed his little girl, his infant son, and his wife. You can see he knows me too." The Slick picked up all the guns, but he saw something in both Dutch and Henry. "You gunfighter," he said to Dutch, "get over here by Dawson's woman. Brother Anglin, you stay right there." He took a gun and let Olivia down. "Child, you'll live through what happens here, but I want to give you some good advice. Don't ever speak to strangers." The odds were against me. Hell, they were against us all. "Steady, Captain." The longer he held at gunpoint, the better. For each passing minute, he was changing into the beast. Harry wanted to go be with his father, but when he started, Castle had transformed into the werewolf. He pointed at me, and I knew it was over for me. "Dutch," I said as I began moving slowly away from the wall. "Take care, Sherry." Henry, Dutch, Lazy Eye and Price all shouted at him, trying to get his attention. He lifted his enormous head and howled. I saw Harry's hand slip into his back pocket. A flash of a small knife struck the creature. He removed the knife and pointed to Harry. Then he turned back towards me and growled, "Hey, Ugly, bite on this!" Somehow Mike and Brenda had been forgotten. Somehow they had managed to get that Gatling gun out of their room and began firing, and everyone fell to the floor. The firing gave me a chance to get to the bar for my gun, just as the Gatling gun ran out of bullets. The werewolf turned and took a swipe at me, and now I had my gun back in my hand, and I started blazing. Henry was loading another gun, and he shouted as the werewolf slumped to the floor, dying. He couldn't lift a claw or his heavy head. I had one round left. I tossed it to Captain Terry. "He owes you, Captain." And Terry placed the barrel of the 45 inches from the werewolf's head and squeezed the trigger, and the beast fell over, dead. Epilogue. The body was burned, its head removed, and still Basil Watson examined everyone for bites, scratches, anything which could have spread his curse. Dutch and Henry headed back to Crazy Woman Creek. And Olivia continued to give Val Price hell. Wow. Suddenly another one. Wow. Absolutely exhilarating, chest-pounding, nail-biting action and terror from the incredible mind of David Holley, exclusive to the DMTForestOfFEAR channel. Big thank you, David, once again for letting us go back through this incredible collection of yours. I really do hope you're enjoying this as much as I am as we revisit the good times and the adventures of the Hostile Intent series. Well, guys and girls, as ever, you know the drill. Please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid crew. Now, if you can pen a story packing that much punch, then please do get in touch with me at the contact email, which is as on screen. contactthedeadone@gmail.com. I really look forward to hearing from you. As always, guys and girls, I hope you're well and happy and taking a fight back to life and trying to stay fit and focused. But above all, remember, be safe, not sorry.